Hi guys, it's Kelly here and welcome to the Stamp of Approval blog hop. So on the left hand side you can see that these are two different images, and I actually just kind of built them up to be one. I just fell in love with these little heart-shaped leaves, so I definitely wanted to use those. I'm going to be using, there's a die cut that matches those leaves, and I just die cut that out of some copy paper just to use as a guideline. I'm using Intense Black Simon Says Stamp ink. This is completely Copic safe. So you can see I just laid my leaf down on my paper, and then I'm going ahead and stamping my flowers. I cut two of those leaves, and I'm going to lay the other one down here just so I can get my placement right. I want to make sure that I have enough room for all of the flowers I want to put on it. I did use a total of 5 flowers. Working in odd numbers is more pleasing to the eye, so that's what I chose to do. And then the reason that I wanted to show you this whole process is because when you take those leaves away, it just looks like I randomly stamped flowers, but really, like, I'm not that good. I had a little bit of help. So I masked one flower, and that's going to be sufficient for me to stamp the leaves. These leaves are pretty separated on their branch, and I didn't want to have to mask each individual one. So this is how I made it work for me. Here, that mask over the one flower is going to block the end of my leaf, so it's going to make it look like one full piece. It was nice to only have to mask one little flower. And then I'm just going to go in with a Copic safe pen, because I'm going to be doing some shadowing later, so I want to make sure that this isn't going to smear on me. And then I'm just going to draw in the stems. This is really easy to do because the branch is just an outline. So just by drawing in a few quick lines, it looks like it is one completed piece and not like we use 2 stamps to make one. So I'm going to be doing concentrating, I guess, a little bit on the leaf coloring. I had a follower, a subscriber, who had asked me about coloring leaves, so I'm going to show you a couple of different options. Here I'm starting with my lightest color. I always do start with my lightest color, and I put it where I want it to be the darkest. I'm laying down a little bit of color using a light hand and small flicking motions. These are not large areas, so I have to be very careful about how much color I'm putting down, but I'm really saturating the middle here on this one. Anything that you color darker is going to make it fall to the background, so it's almost going to make the leaf look like it's concave. This was not the one that I chose to go with. I mean, it was pretty similar, but not exactly the one that I chose to go through the whole card. But it is an option for you, and especially something like this with that heart shape where it already gives you the indent at the bottom. This is something that's really easy to do and get a good result. Now you'll see me using the YG01 down the middle, and that's like bleaching the color out. The reason that it's doing that is because it's lighter than the rest of the inks, and Copic's work together. So this is another option here. It's the same idea of making the center concave. This makes the most sense for this leaf shape. But it's not with feathering. It's just small, basically straight lines. So I'm just outlining the center and then down around the bottom. This is a less texturized look, but not all leaves have a ton of texture. Some of them are more flat. So if you like that look, also an option. Third option is, I guess, saturating your color on one side. This is just a way to get some variation amongst your leaves. This type of coloring is especially important if you're using a light source. In this card, I'm not for my coloring. I will be for my shadows, but not for my coloring. So this is pretty saturated. It's going to be fairly flat, even though I am doing some feathering. I'm covering the whole thing in the YG01 at the end. So it's really just going to be some subtle shading on the right-hand side there. This leaf right here is the one that I chose to go with for the whole card. Again, coloring the middle darker makes the most sense for this particular shape. So that's what I'm doing. But I'm not over blending. I'm leaving a lot of striations, which is going to give me a lot of texture. So it's not as dark as the first leaf that we did. And I'm doing the same thing that I always do. Lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. And then I'm also going to do the same thing I did with the first one, where I kind of bleached out the middle. it's almost like putting a vein in your flower, and it gives it a lot more texture. So the last option, which I don't particularly care for this shape, but again, it is an option. Like I said before, anything that's darker falls in the background. So if we make the outside edges of this flower darker, it's going to appear like they're kind of curling back. So it's not that it doesn't work for this shape, I just didn't care for it. It's, you know, especially like in the fall when you're coloring a lot of leaf cards and you have leaves that are in various shapes, these variations are really helpful. This particular card, all of the shapes are exactly the same, so I did not want that much inconsistency throughout the leaf. So now that I've shown you the examples, I'm going to go back and make them more cohesive, make them more similar to that fourth leaf that I did. And this is pretty easy to do. Nothing, I mean, none of the ways that we colored them were too outrageous. The only one I am not going to be able to fix is that one where we put the darker on the outside, and I just, you know, I'm going to have to suck it up. Not all cards are perfect. This one doesn't, I mean, it is darker still on the right-hand side, but it's sitting behind that other leaf, so again, that one's not a huge deal either. And then I'm going to go ahead and color all the rest of them the same exact way. And then I will be back with you guys, and then we'll do the flowers. So here we're starting some bees, and it's so funny because you can see from the cap colors that my mid-tone looks, well, my second color looks darker than my third, but it's not. So make sure you're really looking at what the color is and not just what the caps are, because sometimes not true. So here I'm starting with my lightest color and I'm putting it in the darkest areas. This flower was by far my favorite. I just thought it was just a really interesting design. So, but I want to be careful to make sure that I'm leaving a highlight. I don't want it to turn into like one big mushy blob. So I'm being very careful about where I add my shading. I'm trying to stick to the bottom and the center of the flower. Now, when I do my coloring, I usually put in a little bit of color the first time around, and then once I hit my darkest color on the way back, I'll add even more, and you'll see that here until we fill in the entire bloom and all of the petals. But you want to use your darkest color pretty sparingly, especially in something as like a tight of a space as this is, because you don't want to eat that highlight. And you'll see at the end when we cover it with the entire lightest color, the reason the highlight's so important is because that's what gives you depth. That's what gives you the separation of the petals, so it doesn't just look like a flat image. So this is my second lightest color, and I'm taking this all the way, almost all the way out to the edges. And then I'll just have that, the lightest color, as my highlight. But you'll see once it's all colored together that it really does give a nice separation to all of those petals, and put the ones, you know, that are smaller, that are supposed to look behind, like they are actually behind. So just, you know, if you watch my videos, you heard me say all the time, like, don't eat your highlight, don't eat your highlight. I know I'm a broken record, but it's really that important, I promise. It really is. So, this is the Stamp of Approval Blog Hop. If you do not know what Stamp of Approval is, I did a video earlier this week for it. Basically, it's Catherine Pooler. She handpicks, and in some cases actually designs specific stamps, dies, what have you, to put in a box that will be your happy mail. So this is one of the things that is included in the box for this month, which will be available April 20th. And there's prizes and all kinds of stuff. So if you're finding this on YouTube and not on my blog, please head over to the blog and participate in the blog hop. You might win something. So I just did the same thing, you know, with this one that I did with the other one. You know, sticking to my center, the bottom, and the center. Careful to leave my highlight. And I just really love this color scheme. Like, I don't know what it is about like a navy and a neon green, it just totally sucks me in. They're not even like spring colors. I just really love the way that they look together. I'm a sucker for the bright colors. I just adore them. So once I get the lightest color on here, I'm going to go color the rest of the flowers. I didn't feel like it was necessary to have you watch me color 5 different flowers exactly the same way. If you need to see it again, hit the rewind. YouTube's great for that. So now all the flowers are colored, and we're just going to do the centers. I only picked 3 colors because it's a very tiny spot, but you'll notice one is a Y, one is a YR, and one is an E. And it's because I wanted to get the most contrast in such a little area. So picking that dark E is going to really give me some contrast comparative to the Y. So I colored all the centers, and now I'm just going to go in and do a fairly light shadow. I just wanted something that was going to help it pop off the page since it's going to be a 1-layer card. I always operate with my shadow being, you'll see me there hold my pen. The light source is in the top right, which makes my shadow to the bottom left. And you know, this is something that just comes with practice, and you just saw me do it there, and sometimes I have to check to see like how it's going to hit a flower or a leaf or whatever the object is. I skipped the branch with my darkest gray, which was a C5. I did not do the branch because a branch that thin would not cast the same amount of shadow as a bloom that large. So that's why I just hit it with the C3 and the C1. And I usually do bare minimum 3 colors. I just like the blend I get with that. And then I'm going to blend it all out with the C1. It's not anything that's going to stand out a ton as far as in the card design, but it does help that flower kind of come off the page. So I'm using Simon Says Stamp black ink. This is not the same thing as the Intense Black. This is not Copic safe, so be aware of that. If you're purchasing or using, don't mix the two up. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment right over where I have kind of a bare spot of the flowers. And it is legible, but it's not as legible as it could be. So I'm going to use my white gel pen, and I'm just going to add some fun little details to those flowers. I love doing that. I just think it's a fun way to make it your own. So, you know, thank God Kathy Rakusin came up with that years ago so we could all copy it. Speaking of Kathy, she is also a guest designer for Stamp of Approval this month. So if you have not gone over to her blog to check out her stuff, you absolutely should, because she is mind-blowing. Mind-blowingly talented. So I'm using my white gel pen. I'm going around my sentiment. That's going to help make it a little more legible. And then I always outline my images. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is just a journaling pen that I like. That works well for me. You can use a Copic multiliner. You can use a jelly roll. You can use whatever you have that you're comfortable with. And then the last step is just adding some clear Wink of Stella. I just added it to the tips of the flowers. I didn't want it to be overwhelming. Just a hint of shimmer. And that is the entire card. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you guys have an awesome day. I will catch you in the next video. Bye.